I'm Steve Williamson, and I arrived in Cottage Grove on July 15th, 1976. Is when I moved to town. I made a short visit in 1975. And when I got here in 1976, I remember I hitchhiked out here, and when I got to town, I looked in my wallet, in my pocket. I had $37.50. So Cottage Grove has become my real home. I've spent many more years here than I did where I grew up in Louisiana. And Cottage Grove, I've just loved this community and the people in it. The Historical Society does such great work. And but if it weren't for the Cerro Gordo project, I wouldn't have probably ever heard of Cottage Grove. And I'll tell you just briefly how I came about it. I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I had just gotten fired from my job working railroad construction by my uncle. It's this big southern story where he really wanted the construction company for his two sons. And my last name was Williamson, not Campbell, so I shouldn't have any part of that. So anyway, right before Christmas, and I was wandering around downtown Baton Rouge, I went into a bookstore, because bookstores and libraries where I've always gone when I was feeling upset, needing solace. And in the back of the bookstore, there's this little rack of free publications. And in there is a magazine, it was called Utopian Eyes. And the back had this little ad saying, we're building a new town out in the forest of Oregon. And it said car-free railroad. And I thought, oh, railroad. So that's what I'd done, that's what I was raised to do. My family had a company doing railroad and highway construction. And so I called out, spoke to Chris Canfield, Jen Henman, a couple of people. I just said, yeah, we're going to start building on that railroad this coming summer. Come on out, come on out. So I came out, and of course the railroad never got anywhere near built, but it's been a wonderful place. And I've so enjoyed the 40-plus years that I've spent hiking around Cerro Gordo. It's just been, it's made a substitute for my land, for where I grew up in Louisiana. Whoops. Okay, the title of the talk is Where's the Town? And that covers, over the years when we'd be out hiking through the woods, we'd occasionally run into one or two or three, four people. They'd come crashing through the woods and looking around. Where's the town? Where's the town? Where did we go wrong? People who visited here almost invariably thought that the town was already built or under construction. And let me see. Sorry for the hang up here. Finding my. Yeah, I put it in my. I put the.
Let me just click for you.
The little advance.
You were talking about that. You can stay here.
Got it. Thank you, Kim. Kim Cuddy. She grew up at Cerro Gordo. She's a real take charge person.
I just wanted to have to wait.
Now, the book Golden Was the Past, Volume 2, has a real good story about Cerro Gordo, written by Diane Massar, former president of the Historical Society, and Doug Still. So this is probably a more fair and balanced article that I'm going to give talk, but it's in Golden Was the Past, as well as the story of how Cerro Gordo Mountain got its name, because we didn't name it. Now, one thing I was taught early on doing historical presentation is to do something, just a slight nod to the Native Americans that lived in the area. And this is the chief, Halo Tish, that was in charge of the area that Cerro Gordo encompasses. Now, Cerro Gordo is that mountain that you see straight east of town at the end of Main Street. And it was named for the Battle of Cerro Gordo in 1847. And this article from 1919, Old Pioneer Days, has both the story of Chief Halo and how the mountain got its name. Because you see, veterans from the Mexican-American War settled around Dorina and Cerro Gordo, and it looked a lot like the mountain where they fought the battle at. And let me show you here just, yeah, that's Cerro Gordo Mountain right there, and Bald Mountain. And this view is from Baker Bay. Now look at this, compare with this view from the Battle of Cerro Gordo. This is the hill up here, that's Cerro Gordo, and that's Buena Vista. And very similar look, so that's how they could pretty easily do it, make the name. And here's a picture of the town of Dorina before it was moved to build a lake. That's Cerro Gordo Mountain there and Bald Mountain in the background. And this is when they're building the dam. I want to start off with some of these early historical pictures. Now this right here is where is that big rock face where they took the basalt that they were building for the roads. And an old timer, he was telling me when he was working on that, he said every time they blow off a stick of dynamite, rattlesnakes would just come slithering off the mountain. And you folks that grew up around Cottage Grove, you know, it used to be called Rattlesnake Hill. I found that reference in the 1915 Sentinel, and said that we're calling it Rattlesnake Hill because nobody was out there hunting rattlesnakes. It was the last place in the area where there were still rattlesnakes. This is a picture of the Doolittle School that was up on Cerro Gordo, gosh, about 1.5 miles from Dorina, close to 2 miles. And here it is in the wintertime. The Doolittle family had a large place out there. The school was state, was certified by the state. This picture has names of the kids. And that woman right there is Frances Dugan, who was just kind of legendary in Cottage Grove teachers. And she was also a teacher of Opal Whiteley. And this is a small map, it didn't reproduce too well, of the Doolittle Ranch. Now, I'm kind of convinced by reading Hugh Doolittle's diary, all the papers I found, all the maps, I'm kind of convinced that Hugh Doolittle was trying to make his own town up there. He called it Paradise Hill, which we didn't know until just 10 or 15 years ago. But the Doolittle family called the ranch Paradise Hill. And they had enormous orchards. They had a bunkhouse that I think 20-something men lived in, and a school for their children. So they were really good. Now here's where we come in. This is the picture that lured just everybody, all the people from Cerro Gordo. We came here. It was, you know, I think anybody in this room who's from Cerro Gordo can say, yeah, we saw this picture and it felt like we should go there. Now what's interesting, we're building a new town, but look carefully at this picture. This is an Elizabethan England picture with a broken, you know, that's all broken down there. But I think because this picture was on just about all of our newsletters and advertising, that was the impression people got when they were coming there. And where's the town? Where's the town? Which, by the way, as I go through this, if any of y'all from Cerro Gordo think I make an error in a date or something, or you have something to contribute, just shout out. The other thing I thought about, what was really neat about talking to the Historical Society about Cerro Gordo is, many of you were in Cottage Grove when Cerro Gordo moved here. And it'd be interesting to find out what is it like to be living in a community of, what was Cottage Grove in 1973? Was it 8,000? 7,000, okay. What's it like living in a community? And here comes some people from California saying, we're going to build a town for 2,000 people just 7 miles from here. And it's also where your Boy Scouts go and get their merit badges, and where most people have hunted deer for the last 100 years. And you can't hunt deer out there anymore. And so, PR-wise, it could have been done better. And this, just early after the Cerro Gordo experiment, we called it the Cerro Gordo Project. We were trying to build a new town with, first of all, based on environmental principles, where we were using composting toilets, solar power, wind power. Chuck Massar here, he was one of back there, he's one of the big reasons why I got involved with Cottage Grove and stayed in Cottage Grove, involved with Cerro Gordo, because Chuck had co-written a book on wind power back in the 70s. And then to meet him here, I was real impressed by the book, and then to meet the author of it here, I thought, okay, this Cerro Gordo thing must have something to it. So, thanks, Chuck. And a little map of the place that we made. Now, we call this place at the top of the mountain. This is Row River Road down there, and the gravel road where you go in, where it splits off and goes over here to one of the nicest bed and breakfasts that you ever find. If you have, are you still doing the bed and breakfast, Suzanne? Okay, yeah. If you got friends from out of town, the Lily of the Field bed and breakfast is the nicest around. But we called it the Enchanted Valley. That was like 30 years before we knew that the Doolittles had called it Paradise Hill. This is another logo that we used over the years, but it didn't quite have the pulling power of that Elizabethan town. Here's a picture of the founder of Cerro Gordo, Chris Canfield, and his 3 boys. Jason, the tallest, Daniel, the littlest, in the middle, Daniel's back there, and Eric Canfield right down there. And here is one of the early meetings that we had out of the land. This is probably about 1974, maybe 75 at the latest. This was at the barn. There used to be an old barn out there that I think the England family built. But there's an old barn that we propped up and used for a while. It's gone flat. Oh, now this right here, this is one of my favorite pictures. This is the Cerro Gordo accountant right here, Dick Cutting in a straitjacket. And this was from,
Don't drink the water.
yeah, sometime in the 1970s. Nick never got out of that straitjacket. He continued to be the CPA to this day, and his daughter Kimberly is here. And this is me. When I first arrived here in 1976, I was a Gandy dancer doing railroad construction, and this was taken out on the old OP&E railroad line. And this is a picture. I'm going to crop it and get it to this historical, because this is the Cerro Gordo Ranch stop for the OP&E railroad. Our grand design was to have a car-free community on this 1,200 acres and run it with a railroad and hook the railroad up to the OP&E railroad down there, which would have been real neat, but one, the site's way too steep for a railroad unless you've got billions of dollars, and two, the Row River Bike Trail has worked pretty well. A picture of my dear wife who I met at Cerro Gordo. We know the exact place we met out on this road. And this is when she was a disc jockey for K&D radio. And I put this in a few other pictures of Cerro Gordo people, because in telling you where's the town, it's where's the people. So I wanted to talk about the people that contributed, because there were so many people that came through Cerro Gordo that made real significant contributions to Cottage Grove. And this is 1977, a brochure they sent out. help us celebrate the start of construction. And that's when we were building what we called, a house we call the prototype. The houses out there were designed to be built in clusters. And one of the problems Cerro Gordo had was the land use laws say there's one house per 10 acres. We were trying to put like 4 or 5 houses on just a couple of acres. The idea was that people wouldn't have front and back yards so much. The vast majority of the land would be held in open space.
We were zoned on Cerro Gordo to do a duplex on 10, so we could do a single or a duplex. So Chris encouraged us, those of us that bought early, to build duplexes, and then we would do another duplex and start our clustering before he was going to try to do a cluster subdivision, which hasn't been done in Lane County, and that was what he was up against constantly, was just dealing with it. So we developed piecemeal in 2 neighborhoods is what we're left with duplexes and a few single-family houses dotted in around it. And the idea was to do the clustering to not develop on the overall land, to leave as much open space and to have the neighborhoods be clustered together, thus cutting down costs of development and then having the land to use. So that was what the idea was.
And one of the things we ran into was we wanted to build the houses where they were alternative energy, composting toilets, all these things that banks around here had never heard of. And banks only loan on code, houses that are built to code. And we're talking about 40 years ago with composting toilets and solar power, and all this is very new itself, new technology. But the code, the land use codes were just not, what banks would loan on. Banks will only loan on houses that are approved by code. And how many houses are out at Cerro Gordo today? I forgot to count.
13.
How many?
13.
13, okay.
There was one just recently built.
Right.
And the other thing we tried to do was build as non-toxically as we could when we're continuing to do that. And we used a lot of the materials off the last house that grew on Cerro Gordo, where it was milled. And Charlie built it, and he even was able to get from a local person here in Cottage Grove, had a pecan tree that fell down 2 years before we built the house, and he had it milled and dried and used it for the floor in the house.
Well, it is a beautiful house. And all the houses out there are practically works of art themselves, if you ever get a chance. Here's where I come in. Again, this is 1976, and we put together this brochure, the Cerro Gordo Traction Railway, and that was kind of an idea for people of what the railroad was going to look like. Now, in this, we talked about the cost. We were going to build a strip of railroad track way up in the middle of the property first as a lure to investors, and I'm really glad we didn't, because now there'd be 1,000 feet of railroad track just up there in the woods. But and there's my picture, and I was recruiting people to work on the railroad track, and so many people that got involved with Cerro Gordo had master's degrees and PhDs, and they don't make good railroad, workers. The other thing was this in effect. We didn't realize, we were asking people to send in money for shares of the railroad. And so we didn't realize it, but in effect we're selling securities, which is a no-no, unless you're real licensed. But fortunately I never got in trouble for selling securities. This is a barn racing. There's a barn out near Suzanne's house that was, the foundation of it was built by the women's group, and then everybody helped putting the frames on it. Well, there's me right there, and Fred Ewer and his son and Daniel Cantfield. Oh, this is a group of people. In 1979, we had a summer college where students from all over the United States paid about $500 or so a person to come camp at Cerro Gordo for the summer. and help us build it. So they worked on trails, all kinds of stuff. It was really fun. Just a community gathering, and that's Chuck Massar right there, and
Catherine's in the blue.
Catherine.
That was their wedding, my dad and Catherine in the middle.
Oh, okay. And, over here, this woman, Hannah Still. If you've been around Cottage Grove, she passed away a few years ago, but that woman was a giant in mentoring young girls and women in Cottage Grove. There's another shot of Diane Massar, and there's Karen and Lynn Cody. Lynn Cody was the founder of Oregon Till. And this is the women's group. I'm not sure how this guy, Carl Hinkover, got the women's group. We were progressive early on. Okay, and then this is one of the fairly, kind of a lot of newspaper articles that as soon as you picked up the paper, your throat got tight, your stomach came in knots, because, it's lean times on Fat Hill. Oh, Cerro Gordo means fat or rich hill in Spanish. But the fat in Spanish, it means more opulent and rich than it does obese today. The Cerro in Spanish, it's a complimentary thing. And over here, the Historical Society has put together these 3 posters with articles from the Sentinel over the years. And yeah, I do encourage, back in the back, there's a really nice display of pictures from all over Cerro Gordo. And
Steve, one of the things that the small towns book that I brought over there and mentioned, and I was 8 when we moved here, so for me it was all just going out to the property and hanging out with the community, and there's a lot of stuff that goes with that. But what I read was there were some small pockets of community opposition that, and what they didn't understand, and I teach at Lebanon High School, and I explained to my students that my family came up here for an ecologically based community that was green before its time, is kind of how I describe it to the current kids. And they go, oh, green, that's cool, it makes sense. But back then, green attracted 2 groups. It attracted the highly intelligent, educated community who wanted to have sustainable, minimal footprint, this and that and the other. But it also attracted the kind of alternative lifestyle hippie crowd as well. And one of the quotes in the book was that there was a fear that we were a bunch of welfare abusing hippies, kind of coming in to invade the community. And what they finally realized was that we were actually more beneficial, but it took a while with that kind of controversial tug of war between the 2 groups.
You're absolutely right, Kim. The term green, it did attract 2 very different groups of people. People like Karen, the Massar, Suzanne, and then, there was one group called Centeny that had a group marriage thing. And I think another group that wanted it early on, that wanted to do like a group marriage thing where everybody's married to each other. You talk about a mess. How hard one relationship is to keep going. And you try to keep going 3 or 4 relationships, it was just crazy. Here's a picture of me back in the 1990s when we did the Opal Whitening Memorial at Opal Park. And if it weren't for Cerro Gordo, I wouldn't have I probably wouldn't have had the idea or the space to do the original Opal Park and Opal Whitening Memorial with Fred over here. And here's Emily Norton-Tanigan. She was the first actress to portray Opal. That's a great picture over there. And look at this tall sculpture in the tree. That's Fred made that sculpture out of yew wood. And there's a lot of gemstones in the creek down there. Oh, here's a little fairy sculpture that was there. There's that big sculpture of a woman, and there's this guy right here is the old man of the forest. And we have all these sculptures out there now where you're just wandering around and you run into a sculpture. Fred probably made 50 sculptures over the years, but most of them have been, some were stolen, some were vandalized, some were just overgrown and lost. And there's another one. Okay, this is Fred here or there. and his two sons, Doug and David, with the Lady of the Forest. And Fred's my oldest friend, and I met him in a cooperative household here on Washington Street. And the first thing we bonded over was boxing. We're both boxing fans, and we both did amateur boxing. Fred did it a lot more than I did. And Fred would tell me these stories like he knew Muhammad Ali when he was Cassius Clay. He knew Sonny Liston. He knew Joe Louis. He knew, I mean, all these people have all these little stories. And then ESPN starts running classic bouts. And I'm watching them, and there's two fights that Fred tells me about that he was at ringside that were classic bouts. And bam, I've got it, there he is, at ringside in those classic bouts. But the two boys are the really important ones, and you know, like, where's the town? These two boys are part of it. They helped us build Opal Park. But also, if you remember the Thurston High School shooting 20 years ago, next spring, they were two of the 5 Boy Scouts that pulled down Kip Kinkle in the cafeteria. And had they not been, had Cerro Gordo not happened, and Fred, you're not come out here and got married, had the two boys, they wouldn't be sitting at that table when Kip Kinkle comes in with the rifle. But they were there, and they were on Larry King, and that was just, I just put it in there because it's an example of how people can have contributed. Here's another view of the back of the side of Cerro Gordo, kind of looking west from the front meadow. Oh, pancake breakfasts, how could I leave those out? Had a 40-year tradition of pancake breakfasts, and Don Norden there was the cook on most of them, and his son, Nathaniel, is taking over there, and there's Charlie in the middle. We had some great pancake breakfasts. Here's Fred and Daniel trying to move something out of the way. Oh, me and Fred up in the Enchanted Valley with my dog Max. Dogs aren't allowed at Cerro Gordo. It's closed to visitors now too, but you can't take the dog anymore. You can't take that dog anymore either. I have like 5 pictures, and all the pictures I have of Cerro Gordo turned out to be Fred with one of my dogs. This is hair up in the snow. And it's really hard to convey how powerful this image was. I think people saw it and they just dropped their lives. People in this room just completely, they sold their houses, quit their jobs, and just picked up things and moved up here with the hope of building this new town. So, where's the town, right? I put, if your name's not on here, sorry, I was late at night, I put together a list of people from Cerro Gordo. Not all of them stayed involved for all the time, but they were part of it one time, and what they did for the community. If you ever went to Dr. Richard Page, Vic Page in Cresswell for dentistry, Diane and Chuck Massar, too numerous, their contributions are really too numerous to mention. Well, Diane was president of the Historical Society. She was one of the editors for Golden Was the Past. Gosh, she helped start Parent Partnership. What else? A bunch of things. Chuck was the former director of the Cottage Grove Public Works, and also started one of the first software companies in this town before people even knew where software was. Whoops. Suzanne, right there. Suzanne, you've worked like 30 years in what social service agency?
I just retired after 42 years. With senior and disabled services, and prior to that, I was the person that started the WIC program in Cottage Grove, and then when the WIC program got transferred to Eugene, I went back to school and then got working in senior services, so I was the worker here in Cottage Grove for the last 36 years.
Wow, 42 years. That is a real contribution in addition to all the things out there. Eric Allen here is KLCC's announcer. Julie Rogers, she's deceased now, but she taught French. Hannah Still's deceased, but she was a mentor, of course, Karen. And Charlie Rogers in Southern Oregon. Charlie's now a professor at Southern Oregon State College of Geology, and he's also built this geological museum down there. Lynn Cody, Janton Inga with longtime associate, Fred Ure and his sons, Kim Cutting, of course, and Kim, what's your position with the Lebanon School District?
So I'm in my 23rd year of teaching Spanish at Lebanon High School, but I'm also an administrator and do their summer school and their college program, and I'm an adjunct professor for Oregon State University and Portland State University, and I'm working on my doctorate.
Okay, boy, no.
See, overachievers. And Nathaniel Norton is not here, but he's a teacher with Montessori. Yeah, he's a certified Montessori.
He's a Waldorf graduate, but he has his own school out here on Echo Hollow, that's Nature's Mystery Awareness School.
Thank you.
And they're doing mentorship programs for both the boys and the girls, kindergarten and expanding as they go.
And look on Facebook for the Nature Mystery, because you'll see all these really cute pictures of kids that are just completely covered with mud and stuff, because he gets them out in the woods and lets them be, you know, like kids out in the woods. And the project's at a new place now. It's kind of the first phase, whatever, fourth phase is wrapped up, and now we've gotten these two easements, one from the federal government and one from Mackenzie River Trust. And I was going to ask Eric Allen to talk about the easements. Just in a nutshell, what these easements mean is that large chunks of the Cerro Gordo Ranch, which is almost 1,200 acres, are never going to be developed. They'll be left for wildlife. But Eric, why don't you?
Well, I'm second generation Cerro Gordo. My mother, Shirley Freud, here, built with Bob and Connie Brown one of the very first buildings at Cerro Gordo, the log house duplex that's next to the prototype. My first summer at Cerro Gordo was 1979, and I came home for good in 2010 to be a part of this. And when I got back here in 2010, they were just beginning the process of the first easement to obtain through what's called the Healthy Forests Reserve Program, an easement that preserves Cerro Gordo's silviculture land, which is about 450 acres of evergreen up the upper part of the property for owl habitat, to prove that it's possible to have a working forest that also conserves land. So for owl habitat now, that was successfully obtained in 2011 or 2012, they are girdling trees to create snags that owls will like, cutting down a few things to provide rodent habitat that the owls will then feed on, and restoring the land up there to be a more diverse and healthy ecosystem over time. There's a 100-year forest science plan that is fairly remarkably detailed, and Scott Ferguson of Trout Mountain Forestry was instrumental, as he has been for 30-some years at Cerro Gordo, in getting that easement done. And after that, we became aware of the possibilities of another conservation easement through what's called the Willamette Wildlife Mitigation Program, which was the result of a court settlement between the Bonneville Power Administration and native tribes in the area, because by building dams, the BPA had messed up land and tribal sacred lands and wildlife habitat and so on. And when they lost in court to the native tribes, the BPA was mandated to spend money on conservation each year for 15 years or so. And with the assistance of friends at Mackenzie River Trust, we decided to apply for a second easement that would allow us to protect the incredible oak savannas, the meadows at Cerro Gordo, the riparian areas. And it took an incredibly long process to consolidate ownership, because anybody who's been involved in Cerro Gordo knows how complex everything became. Living simply did not translate to simple structures. So it required going from 146 parcel investors to one ownership entity for this 531 acre property. And that required Herculean efforts. Suzanne has been a key part of that. Don Norden, also Jim Stevenson, and myself make up the 4 founding board members of what's now the 501c3 nonprofit Cerro Gordo Land Conservancy. And through an arduous process, managed over time to succeed in getting an almost $2 million grant to purchase that land and put it away in perpetuity, forever protected from development. And also through a one-time payment via Mackenzie River Trust into an invested trust, we now have money for operations and maintenance that gives us a beginning towards meadow restoration, oak savanna restoration that requires removal of firs to keep the oaks from being shaded out by the firs, to get non-native plants out of the meadows, and so on. So that, we completed that this fall with great celebration, and have had a couple of wonderful gatherings out there in celebration of that. And that now gives us a chance to form a new kind of community neighborhood and maintain the same environmental focus as the initial vision in a different form. So we look forward to the involvement of the native tribes, to Mackenzie River Trust, Department of Fish and Wildlife, the conservation people from Bonneville Power Administration, and everybody in the community who wants to be a part of it. We are a membership organization now, and we have membership information back there to go that Suzanne has put together a board with our celebration postcard from Mackenzie River Trust and the new maps and the variety of other information that tells about where we go from here. So it is a very, very different and yet not so different vision from what Cerro Gordo originally came to be. It maintains that closeness of connection of the land. It maintains a sense of community. And we really look forward to the new phase. It may not have been the initial vision, but it's an incredible success that now translates to 1,000 acres of that property forever protected from development. So we are really grateful to everybody who's participated, and we hope you will join us in putting a new part of the vision forward.
Great.
And we hope to use it as an education model and something that we can work with, like the school systems, where the kids could do ecology projects out there, and have it be something that Cottage Grove as well will be proud of and be able to use. And it's something we see, down Main Street, that mountain. So we're so excited that though we weren't able to do the vision, and Chris worked really, really hard at it, he was the person that put together the protections on the forestry land. And so to come around now to protect the rest of the land is something that we want to celebrate with the whole community in Wayne County.
Janet,
I would like to take a moment to pull together a couple of things. I mean, this has been a wonderful talk and a wonderful chance to all be together. This is a long time coming, and we have a lot to celebrate. But I'd like to take a moment and go back and talk a little bit about the origins and the Cerro Gordo project as opposed to the Cerro Gordo land, that so many of us grew up on or have spent decades. I came in '74, in the beginning of '74. The land was, well, let me go back just a second. Your photo that you're talking about was on the top of the prospectus. And the photo was chosen because part of the image was that Chris lived with was the European village, where people lived together. Maybe the shops were above their home. It was a real community of people. They all knew each other. They supported themselves in a simpler life. That's where that photo came from. And the perspective was, 20 pages, something like that, laying out our ideals, which was, yes, the green, the environmental, but it was designed to be an experimental project where we would pull together all the ideas a lot of us had been working on separately for alternative in education, in health, in cottage industries, a place to be creative. There was so much happening coming out of the 60s and then in the early 70s. So the idea was to find a place to pull that together where these minds could all come and do different things on the same piece. and be supported and feed off of one another. So it was designed to be self-sufficient, where we would have jobs, and we would have jobs that we created, and now over time, as computer, the whole electronic internet, all of that has enabled that type of thing more and more. So that's why a lot of different people came from reading those ideals, and some of them were the clustering of the homes, the preserved, on and on and on, a lot of different things. And right after the town was purchased, LCD was formed to do rezoning, so everything stopped. All the people were coming then. They've been having meetings all over, but everything was stopped, supposedly for a year or two, until they got this all straight. End result of a long story, 18 years before we could move ahead.
Yeah.
So that's where the town part went. Now, the miracle that happened was that Chris Canfield didn't give up, because everybody said it's over. We made a mistake, you know, it's a nice piece of land, but we can't do anything. We can't have the zoning to do anything. And he persevered, never taking credit, but almost single-handedly, with some wonderful people supporting him, and having investors all over the state who, to keep the land, he created investment parcels, and they were supporting the idea of these things. They maybe never intended to come live here, but they helped save and preserve this piece of land and should not be forgotten. And a lot of people here blended into this community. I raised my children here. Wonderful place, and we got to know one another, loved what, you know, the rural people here had to teach us with our good ideas and no knowledge or experience. So that was going on, and miracle after miracle, where everybody said you're insane, but he persevered because he believed in the dream. And the dream was, when I said experiment, was it would be a model where other people could look at this and we could learn. Well, this didn't work, this didn't work. Other people can come and say, I like that, I want to go off and do something different. But this inspires me that it can be done. So not focusing on the negative in our community, or in our nation, world, but on the positive. Let's look at the problems and make something happen. We're fumbling, we've never done it before. We were never to be utopian. It wasn't like taking an intellectual idea and turning it into a reality. It was a creative process. So we expected a lot of diversity and a lot of that energy. And it was never supposed to be just a beautiful setting for a few people to live on. It was a project to reach out and have other people learn from. I don't want that to be forgotten, and I don't want Chris Canfield's process in this. And he worked the miracle of saving the land, going through the time. He worked the miracle of creating the forestry project where we could have our timber, have jobs, and still have more growth on the forest by selective cutting, and the forest, save the forest. And after years and years and years, I'm a couple years behind, but we still had more growth than timber cut. And the second thing is he positioned to put that land in perpetuity, and his goals, were, while everything was still a problem, was to do that, which he did, and then afterward to take the rest of the investment parcels, make them into one, and put them in protection for perpetuity. So he set it all up, and that has happened now. He died on the day that he had just gotten the final word that we were getting all the funds for the forestry that had all gone through. We got all of that because we were so respected by people out there of the research we had done on the land, what we had done so far, how we would preserve the land. So I think there's a celebration for having this piece of property saved for us now to move forward. It will be different. That's the way of the world. But it's there, and we can all join in and do it. And congratulations to all the people like Suzanne and Jim Stevenson, everybody in this room, and a lot of others who stuck it through very hard times. Very, very hard times. So where's the town? Who knows? It's maybe coming.
I think it's all around us.
Steve, so,
Thank you for the time.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I needed to share also because I think that you're focusing on where is the tangible town. And let me just describe, when I was 8 years old and we moved up here, my 3rd grade year, I did not go to public school. The community, and when I went to public school in 4th grade, they had us write an essay. I wrote an essay about community at 10 years of age. And I remember that because the teacher actually showed it to the principal and thought it was a really great essay about what a community is. Because Cerro Gordo might not be a tangible village, but it is a village community of people who are still intertwined today. But they came together and created Sundance School and Sundance Preschool to bring in kind of the whole village it takes to raise a child. I was the only student in my school. I had 5 teachers, 1 every day of the week. I had Steve. I think that that's a very individualized education plan, and it was really interesting. But here was what I experienced at the age of 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and 12 was this wonderful group of grown-ups who came alongside my father when my mother left when I was 8, and helped raise me, and are here and still make me feel like I'm 8. But it's okay. But they love me still, even though I don't see them for long periods of time, but we are connected. It is deeper than family because it's a chosen family. And that's what Cerro Gordo is. And those people who came, and we had a lot of havoc. I call them parents, but the adults, there were divorces and there were struggles because as people realized who they were inside and who their spirit was and who they were as individuals, they realized whether or not they resonated with the people they were with or not, and they moved on to the people that they resonated with. And as a child, you don't understand that necessarily. But as an adult, I look back and I am so glad that they chose the path of choosing the right people to be happy with and have a good life, because that's a good model. That's a good model for our youth today, to not just stick with a bad situation, but to fix it. And as they worked through their processes, they still loved the people that they had been with, and they still cared about what happened to them, and they still moved forward and were an amazing example of community and investing in a community and working on a community. And I will tell you, I babysat that little boy back over there. And I babysat a bunch of these little boys and little girls. Well, the grown-ups went off and had meetings, and I hated meetings because they were boring. But I these wonderful people, I figured it out finally, what they were doing, and I appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Yeah, the first time I got to Cottage Grove, I stayed with Kim and her family, and yeah, I just really treasure that. I just really treasure that. So, questions from the audience.
I have a story I like to share.
Okay.
Everything's been on such this great level, but I got to share it anyway. So I started working at the Dorena Post Office in 1983, and my predecessor never cleaned out her files, ever. So I am cleaning out her files. And she has this file on Cerro Gordo, and she has this chart on how various people at Cerro Gordo resemble members of the Symbionese Liberation Army, and she was sure that you all had Patty Hearst back there.
Yeah.
So, sorry about that. And you know, I was young and dumb, I chucked that, and I would just love to have that document.
Oh
now.
gosh, it's so neat today.
So anyway.
I remember that.
And as far as where's the town, I got that too, working at the Dorena Post Office. You know, they would come up looking for Cerro Gordo and not see the big thing they were looking for. So they would finally wander into the post office, and they always said, where's the town? And so I sent them back down the hill.
Yeah, yeah. We were never as crazy or whacked as people might have thought. You know, like we never had anybody from the Symbionese Liberation Front.
Sure, Steve, it was pretty convincing.
The Rajneeshis visited us one time, I think. But that was it. Yes, I remember that. That was. But most, you know, in most ways, the community of Cottage Grove, you know, could have been a lot nastier to us, because you come into a place, a small town, and tell them you're going to build a town for 2,000 people, most of them Californians, just outside of town. You know, it's not going to make you real popular. But the community has been just fantastic with us. The people I've met through here, the people that accepted me and Karen early on in the Methodist Church and the people in our neighborhood. And so Cottage Grove is just my real home. Chuck, did you?
Well, I think too, there's a whole group of people that we haven't mentioned today that have done pretty incredible things in the last 40 years. I think one of them is Dean Still, the son of
Approbation.
Anna and Doug. He was the founder of one of the founders. Actually, he came a little bit later for the Approbation Center out on west of town, and then did the small stoves through Approbation Research Center. You have to realize that there are millions, literally millions of these small stoves in just about every small country in the world that is developing that was a byproduct of his work here in Cottage Grove. In a stove, Fred Lisa Colgan, with their institutional stoves. That got started because of Dean's enthusiasm for small stoves. Fred's stoves are recognized, I think, in 20 countries around the world right now. Very, very cutting edge technology. They've spun off groups like Silverfire in Eugene that's doing camping stoves and survival stoves. There's another one up there that's doing the same thing. The research center for all small stove testing devices is here in Cottage Grove, basically out on, by
The Blue Mountain School?
yeah, Rat Creek Road, basically that, and Ryan Thompson's recognized as a record world leader in one of the things he's doing. He's a dirty hippie. He's kind of Cerro Gordo. They have been recognized for the work they're doing. Eldon Haynes was one of the early Cerro Gordo people. Eldon, a PhD, and was associated with Jet Propulsion Laboratories. And he was very active here and started a solar energy company using the geyser principle of where you could have solar water heaters that didn't require external power. That technology has gotten bypassed now with cheap alternatives. John Mount, who came here and helped me start Estimating Systems, which got sold to McCormick, actually to Indata in Nashville, which became McCormick Systems out of Phoenix, Arizona now. John worked here in Cottage Grove for 2 decades as their programming manager, and McCormick Systems now is the world's recognized top electrical contracting estimating system, bar none. John lived here, he lives over in Bend now. And by the way, if anybody of you remember, John just turned 90 and he is still very, very active. Cross-country skiing, little downhill skiing, mountain biking, a phenomenal guy. So there's been this kind of a spill-off over, or I don't know what the right word is, of things that have helped put Cottage Grove on the map within certain small arenas. But they're very, very important arenas. And just wanted to add.
That's great, yeah. I forgot about, I meant to get an approbation. That list of people that had made contributions, I was getting late last night and I just stopped it, but I forgot about, I got Hannah still, but I forgot about Dean still an approbation.
So I just, from the book, I just want to read the paragraph that says, though the Dorena Lake residents number only a few, the area is a valued recreational resource for the town of Cottage Grove and neighboring communities. And then it has a person's name, who I shall not mention, and her neighbors were to find others who would join them in opposing the new town. The opposition wasn't always well-informed and reasoned. Some of it was based on the theory that these high-minded new neighbors were a front for some kind of mastermind developer who would get in his foot at the door at Lorena Lake and then run amok in the county. And others were sure that all the Cerro Gordo people were hippies, dopers, and welfare artists who would sit on their hillside above the lake, smoke pot, and run up the public assistance bill. So, yeah.
I was going to make a slide called the rumor mill, and all these things. Did we do this? Did we do that? No.
Mythbuster. There we go. Mythbusters.
And not nearly as much as you might think.
I was always under the impression it was a closed community, that people weren't welcome.
I could. She had the impression that it was a closed community, that people weren't really welcome. And yeah, that might have happened. We had one member from Cottage Grove, most of y'all from the Historical Society know Ray Nelson, you know, what a big man, the Bohemia Park, Bohemia Gold Mines, Ray Nelson. His daughter Nola Nelson was early on and for a good while involved in the Cerro Gordo project. And it attracted a lot of people who were interested. I mean, think of all the elements that go into building a town, whether it's a house or a school or a transportation system. You know, if you had, you know, interesting ideas and forward thinking, you know, this was a place where you could come to. And we had hundreds of people over the years come through Cottage Grove with all these ideas. And it was
Sarah Suzanka.
Pardon?
Suzanka, the woman who did Small Houses. She's written several books on small houses. She was the first popular author. She came to Cottage Grove early on and got into that. Went
Yeah.
back to the university.
She lived with us going to the U of O and got her architectural degree from the U of O
Mhm.
here.
That is what designed Washington Abbey in Eugene. The senior center used early Cerro Gordo.
She's written a series of books on the small house book, and she's one of the 10 top architects in the United States. Yeah.
We had some fascinating houses. There's one of them that still exists. It was a lovely wooden house built on a flatbed trailer. And just, yeah, love it. Here's the town prospectus that was sent out in 1972 that was written by the Canfields, and has that picture of the European village. It has all the ideas in it. And what's really, they then published this first feedback in 1973, people who had gotten the town prospectus and what they thought of it. And there's a bunch of people in here who came out here, Nick Cutting and the family are in here. And then this book, Gathering the Townsfolk, it's got just all these stories of people, why they came to Cerro Gordo, what attracted them, why they stayed. It was the most remarkable group of people I have ever been around in my life. They were so smart, so well intended. Maybe they made a lot of mistakes in all areas of their lives, but their hearts were in the right place, and they were trying to do something new and something better in the wake of the 60s. And it's just been a remarkable. We have before leaving here, take a look at all these posters and pictures, because they're pictures and things that I didn't get in my slideshow. But it's just been remarkable to get to know all the people out there and to be able to walk around 1,200 acres of land.
Steve, you forgot about Oak Knoll. So my mother has passed away, and Chris Canfield has passed away, and Julie Rogers has passed away, and there are several, the generation is starting to pass away. But before my mom passed away, Steve helped us, and Chris, and we all went looking and somebody chose the Oak Knoll, which is a little portion. When you go to Cerro Gordo, there's that little area to enter the bike lane, that's a little park right there, and then right across the road is the way up to the Oak Knoll. And we made it a memorial park there. And I am the advisor for our Rotary International Youth Club in our high school, Lebanon High School. And we do our annual retreat at the Christian camp that's right out there by Lake Dorena. And on Sundays when we're done, we go and I take them up on Oak Knoll. And I show them my mom's bunny. We have a statue of a bunny up there with my mom and her ashes and Julie's ashes and everything. And we stand in a circle and I say, this area is dedicated to people who invested in their dreams and wanted to make a difference in the world. And we stand and I have them make an I will statement where they say what they will do to be better, to do more. And so I take the ideals of Cerro Gordo as a future vision for my students from Lebanon, Oregon. and some of them have never even left the main Willamette Valley, and they come down and it's the first time they've gone more than 20 miles away from home. But they are coming to Cerro Gordo and they're talking about vision and growth, and I tell them about Chris, and I tell them about my mom, and I tell them about Julie, and I tell them about the people that are still working. We still go.
Oh, that is neat. Yes, the memorial park, it's directly across from from Rowell Point. There's a marker right there, Dorena Lake. Yeah, Ralph Point. And that makes me think of, that's where loggers used to stop coming back into town when they got off work and take their clothes off, do a quick skinny dip and get cleaned off. So we followed their example,
Yes, we
did the
did.
same thing.
Piggybacking on what Kim just said, you know, both my kids grew up and that land was such a part of their childhood. But being in a place where they could go off, you know, in meadows and forests and have that solitude or running with friends and just being around nature just grew in their souls. And now my son is dedicated to trying to give that to a new generation of children where they're at home with that, and you know, it's carrying on. So there's so many tentacles in so many directions. And I was thinking just a moment ago of all of the different disciplines, the people who gathered here, from social services, you know, to high-tech stuff. But we got to know each other. You often get in your own little group of what your discipline is, but we all intertwined and we're friends to this day. You know, and we are getting old, but we were kids when we came.
Yes. Yes. It's been fun. Any other questions from folks in the audience or anything somebody else wants to talk about? Yeah, I'll probably never get the railroad built, but I still got my hand.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Talking.